can cut away some of the fear that unions with intelligent machines would somehow strip us of our humanity. Hales cites that, quote, intelligent agent programs already sort email as an example of allowing intelligent machines to make choices for us. But I would go further and say that my own deafness and subsequently my hearing aids AI attempts to adjust the bass and treble of audio input when I go outside, and this assistance makes me no less human, nor does allowing a computer AI to check my horrible spelling and grammar as I write my words any less my own thoughts. I am a collection of agreements between agents running programs, simply inducting a few new agents to run programs and systems. I think in exploring this idea of, I'm sorry, my slides are useless. I think in exploring this idea of distributed cognition, where thinking and judgment are done by both humans and non-human actors, Hales best defines how, I'm going to move to here, how this reconceptualized symbiosis differs from a liberal humanist mindset mindset that came before it, through how the posthumanist might offer more sophisticated ways of thinking about virtual realities. That I wrote that joke in March. I can't believe it's still there. I'm sorry. More sophisticated ways of thinking about virtual realities, or to give into the cyberpunk of it all, cyberspace. While it's that's a picture of me. While it's tempting to give into the most popular examples of virtual reality in media, such as the Wachowski's wonderful Matrix trilogy or Ernest Cline's atrocious Ready Player One, these pieces of media tend to fall into the same trap as the father of cyberspace in literature, William Gibson's Neuromancer, where there's always a, quote, sharp division between the inert bodies that is left behind and a disembodied subjectivity that inhabits a virtual realm. When characters slip between physical and digital worlds, it is their essence being transposed, not necessarily expanding outwards to incorporate both settings at once. The closest we might come to an expanded cognition in this realm might be Neo near the end of the Matrix trilogy, where his subjectivity becomes a hybrid of physical and digital, and he begins to perceive and interact with both the machine world and human world simultaneously. Though you might not remember that, because the third Matrix movie is very hard to watch. Alongside human subjectivity, humans temporarily replacing our bodies as the receptacle for subjectivity for a virtual realm, is the more permanent downloading human consciousness into a computer. And here I turn to author Ken Liu and his excellent 2011 story, Staying Behind, which you can read on clarksworld.com or in his book, The Hidden Girl and Other Stories, which shows a world divided between increasingly disparate communities living entirely in the physical world and a growing community of those who've left their original bodies behind altogether to live in a simulated reality. The question asked by the protagonist of this story pinpoint the concerns of the liberal humanist. Were those who were uploaded now an artificial intelligence? Or were they still somehow human, with silicone and graphene performing the functions of neurons? Was it merely a hardware upgrade for consciousness? Or had they become a mere algorithm, a clockwork imitation of free will? In these concerns, we can see again the focus on a mythical free will as the major objection to a closer relationship with intelligent machines. If the human is signified first and foremost as an autonomous self with unambiguous boundaries, if we signify the human being as a body alone, then those in the cloud might only ever be what the protagonist of Staying Behind sees them as, the dead. But Liu's story does offer an alternative as representatives of the simultaneous simulated world interacting with the physical one through intelligent machines, they're embodied by robots, claim to have figured out how to create children of the mind, natives of the digital world. Although I think that kind of spins into reproductive futurism, and I have 3 separate essays on that. I'm happy to share links. But even in Liu, with the digital minds spawning offspring and continuing to interact with the physical world through intelligent machines, I don't think we quite reach a subjectivity as a distributed system with, quote, virtuality still as a division between an inert body that is left behind and a disembodied subjectivity. I think the reason this image of the posthuman might be so hard to find in literature is because the fear of the posthuman is, as Hales puts it, a major blind spot between literary study. For me, I turn to what might be the strongest example of, or one of the strongest examples of a distributed cognition in literature. I've actually turned to comic books and the work of British author and homeless Mal Santa and Rasputin impersonator Alan Moore, and specifically his work on DC Comics' Saga of the Swamp Thing from 1984 to 1987. I swear to God, I'm nearing the end. Within the book, the titular Swamp Thing does fall neatly into many categories of Hale's posthuman. While yes, Hale's focused on a fusion between literal cybernetics, thinkers such as Teresa Castro and her paper The Mediated Plant have argued that, quote, plant sentience and intelligences are explicitly associated with the mediation of machines. The pathway, unquote, the pathways of a plant and the wires of the computer becoming indistinguishable. Moore's take on a character whose humanness is clearly defined and separated by the intelligent machines they are merged with, through the character's subjective understanding of self, has incorporated an inhuman body, but he still maintains a self-image of a purely human existence underneath, separate and apart from the inhuman. These notions of human purity and separation are destroyed throughout the book, as Swamp Thing is revealed not to be a human within a monstrous shell, but a quote, mass of plant fibers that have somehow been infected with the consciousness of Alec Holland, the human being. Swamp Thing's subjectivity is not located solely within consciousness, but emergent from the noise crashing from within as well as without the human form. As the comic goes on, Swamp Thing becomes less and less signified as a body, becoming conscious, continually growing new physical forms until Swamp Thing 56, which I've pictured here, as the creature's cognition becomes distributed across the surface of an entire planet, driving multiple bodies, none of which claim the power to agency or judgment over the others, as Swamp Thing's consciousness resolves into a, quote, pleasing integrated whole, despite the character's seeming monstrousness. This embrace of an expanded distributed cognition doesn't diminish his identity as it does in Hale's argument. Their, quote, full expression of human capability can be seen to precisely depend on this expansion. Hale's main concern is not what we are, but what we might become from here, and how to steer the posthumans we are away from cultural and philosophical mindsets that might be apocalyptic or anti-human, to craft a consciously emerging posthuman where our agents and our programs run in tandem to help the, quote, long-range survival of humans and the other life forms, both biological and artificial, with whom we share the planet and ourselves. Hale sees a union between intelligent machines and human beings, not as the end of the human, but as an expansion of what we're capable of. Furthermore, she doesn't necessarily discredit artificial intelligence being worth less than human intelligence, but I think perhaps artificial is the wrong term. Under this view of life, we are all emerging from and integrated into a chaotic world rather than occupying a position of mastery and control over it. We are all cognitions distributed between human and machine agents, though our distribution is subtler and less fantastical than what might be found in the pages of a novel or a comic. I consider us distributed still. We are emergent intelligences. Perhaps we shouldn't, as Hales believes, worry about the process of becoming posthuman, but instead accept the posthumans we've always been. Here is my works cited. I'm so sorry. I'm very sure that I've gone over time.